Welcome to Politics for Patriots. Here's your host, the eviscerator of progressive nonsense, the executioner of imbecility, and the grim reaper of BS, Eddie Zipper.
There's a Chihuahua in my neighborhood, and his owners let him run loose in the street. I used to walk by him every day like it was no big deal. I'd even pet him sometimes. But I steer clear of that whole street now because I just found out that Chihuahua is 1024th Rottweiler.
It's funny because it's mean.
Elizabeth Warren's Native American heritage is, hands down, the most absurd issue in all of American politics. If you don't know, she had a DNA test performed that showed she may or may not be 1024th Native American. She did a great big campaign video where the doctor who did the DNA test does the big reveal on the phone. And this thing is embarrassing just to watch. You know that feeling when you watch something, like on a TV show, and it's funny, but you almost can't even watch it because it's just too embarrassing? I have a friend, it's a guy I used to work with, who couldn't stand to watch the episode of The Office where Michael Scott promised he would pay college tuition for all the kids in the inner city school. And then 10 years later, he has to go back to the school and reveal to them that he doesn't actually have any money. It's so embarrassing. He promised it to them because he thought that in 10 years he would be a millionaire, because that's the kind of person that he is. But then that 10 years passes and he can't actually afford to pay their tuition. So he shows up at the school to tell them, and they do this big dance number that they prepared for him, and they treat him like a hero. And then he has to say...
Which brings me to my main point, and that is that I will not be able to pay for anybody's tuition. I'm so sorry.
If you haven't seen it, it is simultaneously one of the funniest and most painful things that you will ever watch. And that is exactly the perfect description for Elizabeth Warren's heritage video. She seems to be the only person on the face of the earth who thinks that the issue is over whether or not she can find a Native American somewhere in the long ago branches of her family tree. I mean, everyone but her understands that it has zero to do with that. Okay, here's the issue boiled down to its absolute simplest form. She checked the box on job applications that her race is Native American. She checked the Native American box. That is not her race. She checked the box thinking it might help her get the job. That's dishonest box checking. Presumably, there was a box marked Caucasian. Did her DNA test find any Caucasian DNA? My guess is she's about 1024th Caucasian. But I guess she didn't check that box because her parents or grandparents didn't have any family folklore regarding the fact that every member of her family she had ever seen or met was Caucasian. If I applied for a job claiming to be a woman because I thought it would help me get the job, I could find lots of women in my family tree to point to. In fact, half of my direct ancestors are women. And I don't even need a DNA kit for that, just a basic understanding of biology. So, we all know what Elizabeth Warren was doing when she checked the Native American box. She was looking for an edge. Okay, so Harvard and the University of Pennsylvania both say it didn't help her get the job. Well, maybe that's true and maybe it isn't. But it doesn't matter. The point is that she was lying about her race because she thought it might give her an edge. Yesterday on The Five, Dana Perino pointed out that Elizabeth Warren never checked that box to get into college or grad school, only when she applied for those competitive jobs. The argument that the school may not have used it as a factor, that means exactly zero. The results don't change that her motivation was to deceive the people doing the hiring, do they? They don't change the fact that she might have been neutralizing the edge that an actual Native American person applying for a job or an actual person of color might have had by lying about her race, do they? The problem is, she thinks we're all idiots. She thinks we're dumb. Not like ordinary dumb, but like over-the-top dumb. Okay, Elizabeth Warren thinks we're like,
of all the cousins I could have married, you was my sister.
That's pretty high-level dumb. That's what she thinks of us. She thinks that we're total morons. She thinks that if she talks about this issue enough, we'll become confused and we'll no longer understand that it's about the very simple fact that she dishonestly checked the Native American box to give herself an edge. Elizabeth, we know you are not Native American. We most certainly know that she was not Harvard Law School's first woman of color, as Fordham Law Review billed her in 1997 based on a telephone interview with the Harvard Law News director. They were actually touting her Native Americanism for cultural diversity street cred. So, this whole thing is very, very simple. Elizabeth Warren checked the wrong box on purpose to give herself an edge. Simple. End of story. Here are the arguments defending her. Argument number one, the schools didn't take into account her race when they hired her. Okay, so it didn't help her to claim Native American heritage. Okay. She still checked the wrong box on purpose to try to give herself an edge. Whether or not it worked, what does that mean? Doesn't change the motivation. Argument number two, I'm 1% Native American. Okay, you're 1024th Native American. Okay, I will stipulate that. You might be 1% Native American. She's not 1% Native American. She's like 0.09%. But, okay, let's say, okay, you're 1% Native American. That's fine. Guess what? You're 99% Caucasian. If it's okay for Elizabeth Warren to check the Native American box, get rid of box checking altogether. Because everybody is probably 1% of every box on the test. It's like that South Park episode. Have you seen the DNA and Me commercial comes on and the people are saying, I'm 5% victim. I'm 13% victim. I'm 21% victim. And then the announcer comes on and he says, order now and find out if your friends should be more sympathetic towards you. All right. Argument number 3. Elizabeth Warren is the best teacher in the history of the whole wide world. That's what they say in the video. All the teachers are saying, nobody was as good a teacher as Elizabeth Warren. She was the greatest teacher. She was a great teacher. Like, this is somehow germane to the issue in any way. I mean, she's a really good teacher. She's the best teacher. She's the bestest in the world. That's great. Good for her. Good for her students. Is your argument that if she was a really good teacher, then surely that means she didn't intentionally check the wrong box to give herself an edge? Because that's not a good argument. One thing has nothing to do with the other. It's just all a smokescreen. This whole video Elizabeth Warren put out is all a smokescreen to cover up the simple fact that she checked the wrong box to give herself an edge. So she's running for president in 2020. We all know that. And she wants to turn this issue around. She wants to turn it into, oh my gosh, look how racist President Trump is because he calls me Pocahontas. Right? She keeps saying Trump calling her Pocahontas is racist because it somehow mocks Native Americans. No. It mocks Senator Warren's lie. That is what it mocks. See, it's funny because we all hear Pocahontas and we go, oh, ha ha, that's funny because look, she's not Native American and we all know that. Ha ha ha. But this is the brilliance of President Trump. And he is brilliant, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise because they are just plain wrong. He has absolutely branded her as Pocahontas. He doesn't ever mention her without saying Pocahontas. And that's brilliant for several reasons. First, because every time you hear it, it forces you to think about her lie. He did the exact same thing to Hillary Clinton. Every time he said crooked Hillary, it forced you to think about her emails. Every single time. And the media was just waxing histrionic over it. They were like, shut up, stop calling her that. But he kept doing it. And every time he did it, everybody in America thought about Hillary's emails. And every single time that he calls Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas, the whole country thinks about the lie she told. Because nobody's confused. The smokescreen isn't fooling anyone. We all know the exact issue. We all know she lied. We all know why she lied. And we all think about it every single time President Trump says Pocahontas. He said the little synapses in your brain start firing and they go, he just said Pocahontas. Who is Pocahontas? It's Elizabeth Warren. Why does he call Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas? Because of the lie. And that all happens in a split second. It happens unconsciously, but it happens nonetheless. The other reason it's brilliant is because it causes the media to constantly talk about this thing. It causes the media and the Democrats to talk about nonsense. He calls her Pocahontas, and then the media come out, they go, oh, he called her Pocahontas, he's a bad person, look, he is a racist, and all the pundits come on, and they talk about it, and Brian Stelter has his show on, and he says, do you think that it's racist when President Trump calls Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas? And the McPundits that they brought onto the show say, oh, yes, I do think it is quite racist when he calls, and we're just saying it over and over. And it just puts into everybody's brain, those synapses are firing, going, oh, why does he call her Pocahontas? Oh, because of the lie. And Warren, Senator Warren cannot squirm out of this because she won't own up to the truth, even though it's so crystal clear to everyone what she did. Even really Democrats don't defend her that much because everybody knows what she did. Mostly right now, Democrats are saying, why is she doing that? Why is she releasing this video? Why is she starting her dumb presidential campaign right before the midterms? Has she lost her mind? I'm actually rather enjoying it. So what is she like? She's like a kid who tells a lie and won't abandon the lie. Just abandon the lie, Elizabeth. That was all she ever had to do to make this go away. She'll never make it go away now. She certainly won't ever back down and just tell the truth now. Instead, she's embarrassing herself by doubling and tripling and quadrupling down on this lie. If she were Native American, her name would definitely be Sitting Bullshit. Nobody believes her. The Cherokee Nation condemned her for the lie. This is quote from the Cherokee Nation, from their statement. Using a DNA test to lay claim to any connection to the Cherokee Nation or any tribal nation, even vaguely, is inappropriate and wrong. It makes a mockery out of DNA tests and its legitimate uses while also dishonoring legitimate tribal governments and their citizens, whose ancestors are well documented and whose heritage is proven. Senator Warren is undermining tribal interests with her continued claims of tribal heritage. She's actually, according to them, hurting Native Americans by continuing to perpetuate this nonsense. And like I said before, lots of Democrats are irritated with her for doing this right before the midterms. I mean, how is this for the wedge issue the Democrats are desperately searching for? I mean, yeah, this is a real kitchen table issue here. This is what the people care about. Unemployment, lowest it's been in generations. Americans are taking home more of their pay thanks to the Trump tax cuts. ISIS has been almost wiped out in the sense of a physical land-controlling caliphate. The economy is growing at over 4%. Manufacturing jobs are growing at the fastest rate in more than 3 decades. Almost 3.9 million Americans have been lifted off food stamps since the election. Trump moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, which so many presidents have promised to do, and none of them had the stomach for it. And Trump has repealed a record number of regulations. But, oh, wait. Who cares about all that? Because he has accused Elizabeth Warren of not being Native American, which we all know that she isn't. Impeach!
Impeach 45!
The Democrats have lost sight of what matters for the country. They are personality obsessed now. President Trump is doing a great job, which is terrible for them, because they have put everything that they have. They have put all their resources into demonizing President Trump. They have promised us disaster, and President Trump has not delivered any for them. They were desperately in need of it, and now they're desperately seeking it. Oh, God, we have to find something because President Trump is doing a great job. We have no issues to run on. We can't run on the economy. We can't run on jobs. We can't run on anything because President Trump is doing such a good job. I'll be honest with you. When President Trump was running, I was not sure about him like I am now. I didn't know what a Donald Trump presidency might be other than different. I was a little bit worried about it. All right? I voted for him in the primary and in the general election, but I voted for him with reservations because I was a little bit worried about it. I wasn't sure. All right, the uncertainty made me nervous because that's the kind of person I am. If I had known then what I know now, I would have voted for him with gusto, with way more excitement than I actually did. For me, this has completely, somewhat unexpectedly, been like living through Theodore Roosevelt's presidency. I mean, take a look at Theodore Roosevelt. In 2018, Theodore Roosevelt is a president whose face is carved in the side of a mountain alongside Abraham Lincoln, Thomas Jefferson, and George Washington. That's pretty good company. But presidents, for the most part, are not monuments in their own time. Lincoln is widely remembered as the greatest president of all time. He has this amazing, gigantic monument in Washington, D.C., but when he was killed, he had just won re-election with only 55% of the popular vote. That is not an epic landslide. Almost half of the Americans voting, almost half of the Americans who were voting in that election thought that General George McClellan would make a better president than Abraham Lincoln. They thought it might be a good move to switch gears from Abraham Lincoln to George McClellan. I mean, in 2018, that is astonishing. It is astonishing to imagine that anyone could possibly have voted for General McClellan over another term for Abraham Lincoln. But they did. The point being, these presidents don't start out as monuments. Okay, George Washington, They hung him in effigy, right? George Washington couldn't stand the hatred that he got from a lot of people. So they didn't start out as monuments, but history slowly recognizes greatness. You have to get past the politics of the day to recognize the greatness, unless you're really smart. And then you can see it while it's happening. I feel bad for those who can't see it while it's happening, because they are missing something tremendous in American history. And that's just sad for them. I mean, can you imagine if you had lived through Theodore Roosevelt's presidency, but you had hated his guts? That's a lot of people. A lot of people hated Theodore Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt was a Republican, but he was a rebellious Republican, just like Trump. He was a progressive Republican before it was cool to be a progressive Republican. The party machines couldn't stand him. Right? He liked to say, speak softly and carry a big stick, but I don't know why, because he never spoke softly. He bashed judges. He fought with the media. He fought with Congress. If there had been Twitter at the time, Teddy Roosevelt would have been tweeting things that pissed people off all the time. He never spoke softly. Right? In fact, it's a shame that everyone quotes the speak softly and carry a big stick line, because it really isn't as Teddy Roosevelt as some of his other quotes. Right? The Teddy quote that's really Teddy is, do not hit at all if it can be avoided, but never hit softly. That's Teddy Roosevelt. And you know what? That sounds like Trump to me too. Right? Don't hit at all if it can be avoided, but never hit softly. Here's another one. This is not a Teddy Roosevelt quote, but Teddy's daughter, Alice Roosevelt, who was his estranged daughter. She was actually daughter from his first wife, and then she died, and then Teddy went out west to be a rancher, and he left his little tiny daughter Alice with his sister Bammy, and she took care of Alice. When Alice got older, she was quite the DC socialite, but that's for another day. None of that matters. She had this great quote about President Roosevelt, though. She said, "To understand my father, you must understand that he has to be the baby at every christening, the bride at every wedding, and the corpse at every funeral." No description could possibly be more on the mark for Teddy Roosevelt, but I'll be damned if that is not Donald Trump as well. I mean, that is Trump. The baby at every christening, the bride at every wedding, and the corpse at every funeral. That's Donald Trump. He reminds me so much of Teddy Roosevelt. I'm not saying they're the same person, so don't come at me with like, well, Teddy Roosevelt was a war hero and President Trump didn't serve. I'm not saying they're the same person. I'm saying that this reminds me of what it would be like to experience a Teddy Roosevelt presidency. Right? They didn't want to let Teddy Roosevelt send the Great White Fleet, this giant navy, around the world to impress all our enemies. So the Congress said, well, we're not going to appropriate the money for the fuel. So Teddy Roosevelt said, fine, I'll send them halfway and we'll see whether or not you're willing to leave them there. Guess what? They weren't. When Colombia, the country, tried to crawfish, Teddy Roosevelt made a deal with Colombia because he wanted to build the Panama Canal. And Colombia tried to crawfish on the deal that they had made to build the Panama Canal. So what Teddy did was he helped foment a rebellion for independence in Panama. Then he recognized Panama as a sovereign nation and then made the deal with Panama instead. That's pretty hard hitting. Right, the establishment Republicans, this was back when everything was run by the regional party bosses. The establishment Republicans hated him. That's why he ended up vice president. He was a war hero and Americans loved him. And the Republican Party, the bosses, they had to capitalize on that. But they didn't want him to have any real power. So what did they do? Well, Teddy was governor of New York, and the bosses wanted him out, so they got him nominated for vice president at the convention. They kicked him upstairs, where he would have a high national title to capitalize on his popularity, but where he wouldn't have any real power. One of the party bosses said it terrified him knowing that Roosevelt was just one heartbeat away from the presidency. So Teddy got nominated for the vice presidency. He ran on the ticket with William McKinley. They won. And then, of course, as I went into detail about on another show, McKinley was assassinated by Leon Czolgosz. Suddenly, Teddy Roosevelt was president of the United States, and the bosses were, they were going, what have we done? Oh, God, we made that crazy Teddy Roosevelt president. Oh, no. So Teddy, what he ended up doing was bringing the American presidency back from the dead. It was a weak institution from Andrew Johnson to McKinley, right? That's the period that contains the most obscure presidents, right? Grant being the only real exception there. Ulysses S. Grant is not that obscure. But it goes Andrew Johnson, Ulysses S. Grant, Rutherford B. Hayes, then Garfield, then Chester A. Arthur, then Grover Cleveland, then Benjamin Harrison, then Grover Cleveland again, and then McKinley. I think that's all of them. I think I got them all. And then comes Teddy Roosevelt and this crazy, wildly energetic presidency that asserts itself as the head of the U.S. government. It changed the presidency for a generation and probably forever by illustrating the possibilities of what the presidency could be and what it could accomplish. And President Trump is like that. I'm a big fan of presidential biographies. I devour them. Guess what? Nobody writes about most of the men who have been president. They write about the Roosevelts. They write about Ronald Reagan and Woodrow Wilson. They write about the founding presidents, not so much Monroe, but the other four, Washington, Adams, Jefferson, Madison, lots of books about them. And like a handful of others. Trump is one of those presidents. 50 years from now, people will be reading biography after biography of President Trump, and those biographies won't be filled with the narrow view of him that exists now. Because history clears away the smoke of politics. And in 50 years, they'll be excited about him. People will love Donald Trump. That is provided that his presidency keeps up as it has been so far. Which I don't see any reason to think that it won't. But if it does, this is what's going to happen in 50 years. People are going to be excited about it. They're going to love it the way people love Teddy Roosevelt today. Was he perfect? No. Teddy Roosevelt was a man of many flaws. As was Lincoln, as was George Washington, as was James Madison, as was Benjamin Franklin, as was all the great, everyone ever. Flawed people, but that's okay. All right, so the Democrats have lost sight of what matters because they are losing the battle of public opinion. President Trump is having an outstanding presidency, defined by peace and prosperity that is scaring the hell out of the Democratic Party. They want him to make big mistakes. They need him to make big mistakes. They at least need it to look like maybe he's making big mistakes. And believe me, they've tried again and again to pin phony mistakes on him. Trump-Russia collusion. They've tried to do that. It hasn't worked. None of it is working. They have no ideas for how to make the country better policy-wise. They have no policy ideas. They have nothing in terms of policy. I mean, there are midterm elections going on. I'm not hearing anything about great big Democratic ideas for policy. All you hear about is who can hate Trump the most. Well, I can hate Trump at a 15. Well, I can hate him at a 20. Well, I can call him these crazy names. Good for you. Nobody in America is interested in any of that. There's like a tiny little slice of people who care about that, and that's it. The Democrats only have ideas about how to insult Trump and who can do it the hardest. And they may win tiny short-term victories on nonsensical issues. Oh, is calling Warren Pocahontas, does that matter? No, it doesn't. Nobody cares. Okay, you might win that. I mean, they're not going to win that issue. I shouldn't have pulled that out as an example. They're going to lose that issue because we all know what Warren did, right? I went through it the whole first half of the show. The point is, that strategy is not smart long-term politics. All right, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, please subscribe on iTunes. Please leave a review on iTunes. Thank you to all of you that have already done that. If you haven't done that yet, I would definitely appreciate it. That's it for today. I'm out of here.
Of all the cousins I could have married, you was my sister.
You just listened to Politics for Patriots with Eddie Zipper. Email the show at patriots@eddiezipper.com and please subscribe.